welcome back to Pokemon Platinum. We'll be doing the last gym finally here, actually finishing it off, so we can then get on to the last route at Victory Road, blah 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 blah, as you do in these games.
Yep. Is there some sort of law that says like everyone who's interested in guitar music has to have long hair?
So, okay. So actually, here's some interesting kind of backstory to that. Like, rock and roll, back in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s was considered the rebellious genre of music.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's funny. It's funny to think of that now because the people who still listen to, who like will
Oldies.
who listen to classic rock or whatever are like boomers who are not rebellious at all. But yeah, so the long hair was another thing that was supposed to be rebellious because you didn't look
men didn't have long hair.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny how that happens when time passes, where what used to be rebellious becomes the norm, and then the new rebellious is whatever's new. And you'd think that after a certain number...
I used to be with it, then it changed. Now it scares and confuses me.
Yeah.
It'll happen to you.
Yeah, you'd think after a certain number of generations, people would just understand that that's the way it happens and get a little bit more comfortable with change. Nope. Nope. Not at all.
Yeah, that's something that, like, I'm going to have to try to remember when I'm, like, 50 and be like, no, your kid's music isn't worse than your music. You're just old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's... Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I was already unpopular.
That's true.
Electabuzz, who has one of the dumbest English dub voices of all the Pokemon.
Oh, God.
Where did the thing in the anime about Pokemon only saying their names come from?
It's something to do with how the Japanese do it.
It's still one of the things about the franchise that I personally just never liked.
I don't like it much either. I mean, I have a soft spot for Pikachu saying Pikachu because that's just adorable. But that's more to do with the voice actor. In the original games, every Pokemon had a growl, which was a somewhat different sound bite that would play when they showed up. And when you would talk to Pokemon, they might like say the word growl or something, but they wouldn't say their name. And then the anime popularized this idea that Pokemon say their own names all the time.
But then the games kind of only half and half did it. Because,
yeah, they sort of...
Like, they'll still... Like, if you talk to a Pokemon on the overworld, most of them will still just say, like, "Rrr," or something like that. Unless if it's Pikachu, where Pikachu will say Pika or something, It's... Ugh, God. But yeah, like, the thing about it, I guess, is that, like, it's... I kind of... They talk about so many Pokemon being intelligent that I feel like more of them should know how to speak. Like...
Especially since in the anime, Meowth just learned to talk just by willpower.
Yeah, and honestly, having talking creatures I found is always a very endearing and fun part of RPGs. I'm going to go off on Dragon Quest shell number 7000 for the channel here. But whenever you talk to the monsters in those games, it's always super endearing and fun. And the idea of, like, okay, like, now you just meet this Alakazam who can speak in English like all these humans and then just see what its perspective on the world is. Like, I think that would be really cool.
Potentially, but I prefer the manga / the origin kind of idea where they're kind of like semi-intelligent, where they have enough awareness, but they're still animals.
Yeah, that's true. And then you also have the question of if you had a talking Pokemon that's like a major NPC, then like the question is why wouldn't somebody just catch it? Happens.
I like the idea though of the psychic Pokemon being smarter. And I like the idea from the Mewtwo movie where some of them, one of them, maybe, might learn to communicate with humans via telekinesis, even if they can't physically speak.
Like, I think, especially Mewtwo, since they've done this in so many of the movies, if they wanted to make a Pokemon actually antagonistic and, like, have it, like, talk to you and be a more traditional villain, they probably could have done that with Mewtwo. And, I mean, there's also the question of, well, there's only one Mewtwo, but they also just have Mewtwo randomly standing around in caves all the time. And there seems to be, like, 6 of them anyway, so, like, whatever. Pokemon lore has never been consistent. Where has America gone, huh? What about Brazil? All right, these places
South
existed
America,
and
yeah.
now they don't. So what the
The
hell?
thing is,
Like, who cares?
Mewtwo only makes sense in the first generation, but like whenever he appears in another generation, you just have to assume that you're in some sort of bad end universe where Red never catches him. Um,
Yeah, it's just like Ash, Red or whatever. They just were just like, oh wow, this Afro guy's guarding this cave. That's neat. And then he just goes along his day to do other stuff, like
Crap.
standing on the mountain, and that's it. That's all he does is just stand up there. I like the idea that he didn't even train his Pokemon up there. He just stuffed them with a couple of rare candies and then just stands up there, and he's just like, "Yep, this is a nice mountain."
I'm gonna stand here forever.
Yeah.
I will stand here for 20 years until I have to go to Hawaii.
Oh wait, there's no service up here. Well, I'm sure my mom won't call. That won't be important.
What if she ever had to say anyway?
Actually, real talk, Red's kind of an asshole because his mom's worried sick for him if you talk to her in Palatown in Gen 2. So just gonna bring that up. Actually, okay, you know what? Thinking about it, that's one thing that I was disappointed by when Black and White 2 came out, is that you never got to do a fight with the Black and White 1 protagonist. Which, again, Gen 2 kind of like made that the expectation. Is just like, okay, you
the
get
thing
to
is,
fight.
if they did that, they would have to either, pick a gender for the previous protagonist, which obviously causes a disconnect with players who picked the other gender.
You can have both.
Or they could give you some way to like determine which gender it was. But we're talking about the Pokemon devs here, so they're not going to do anything technically impressive.
Yeah. So, you talk about picking the gender. One of my favorite instances of that happening is in Splatoon, where the protagonist from the first game does appear, and then randomly the grandpa from the first game will ask you, the character who's never met this person in your entire life, what the first character looked like, and you're just like, wait, why are you don't you
In
but
in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, you talk to this party member in the first dungeon, and he talks about Darth Revan, and he talks about him like he's a man, and you can correct him by saying it was a woman, and that's your lot. That's all the game does to keep the idea of who your previous protagonist was. But in the third Dragon Age game, though, the protagonist of Dragon Age 2 isn't just mentioned like the Dragon Age 1 protagonist is. He or she actually appears, and you have the ability to change their gender, their appearance, and their personality to one of the 3 different personality types that would happen whenever Dragon Age 2 did its automatic dialogue. So you could recreate your Dragon Age 2 protagonist in Inquisition, and they would join you for certain parts of the story, and they would talk like the personality you selected for them, and it was really cool.
So, Black and White 2 actually did sort of have a very, very limited BioWare save file kind of deal, where if you did like IR matching with your old Black and White 1 save file, they would remember your character's name and gender, and then you would see a couple of extra scenes where NPCs flash back and they talk about your old character and stuff like that.
So it had that, but they didn't do the obvious thing and let you fight your protagonist.
Yes, because that would have been a great, bonus for people who played both games. Is okay, you save it and then you can fight.
You fight your old team or something.
I feel like they wouldn't let you fight your old team because, like, what if you traded in like 6 Mewtwo's and beat the Elite Four with that? Because that would be a little weird. But
True.
I mean, granted, I would still like at least remembering your name and your character's gender. And if they were to bring this back for later games, like their customizable appearance, I think too would also be a neat thing for them to do. But that's ambitious, so we're not going to see it.
Yeah, I like how people were talking about Sword and Shield, like the technical shortcomings were something new to the series. And like, yeah, I kind of agree that we should be expecting more at this point, but we also should have been expecting more 3 gens ago. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's just, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back, in that this is now a console game and people want
that was
more,
a really strong
so.
and stubborn camel. It lasted a long time.
There's no camel. Oh wait, no, there is a camel Pokemon.
Camerupt.
Yeah, Camerupt. Okay, never mind. I was just
The,
like,
the straw that broke the Camerupt.
You see, but Camerupt doesn't really look like a camel all that much, or at least kind of what I envision a camel to be. You know, it's like,
I mean,
it doesn't have the long legs. You know,
It's still based on one.
I mean, it still is. That is true. But
Is it a volcano Pokemon?
yeah, it's a
Like its humps are like volcanoes.
I wonder
Yeah.
if they were making a cigarette joke with that.
That would be a real deep cut reference.
especially considering that the camel mascot was like had to be like taken off of stuff because they felt that they were advertising cigarettes too heavily to kids.
It wasn't just that they felt that they were advertising cigarettes too heavily to kids.
It was specifically to
They
do
were
that.
intentionally advertising cigarettes
okay.
to kids. It's a thing that's known.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I am not too familiar with it. So
Cigarette marketing is like a massive controversy from the old days, and if you get into it, you realize why there are so many goddamn regulations now, and why pop culture is so reluctant to have cigarettes in it now, even though to our mindset here in 2019, that doesn't seem like such a bad thing to have in TV. But
you know, isn't it great that we've almost completely wiped out nicotine use in teens? It'd be really, really big shame if, you know, somebody were to introduce something that would make that rate higher than it ever has been in decades. Don't vape. Please don't vape. Anyway, what were we saying? Yeah, all right. Oh, God, I hate this thing. Electivire just looks... I don't know what it is about this thing that makes me think it looks stupid.
the
but it just
style
does.
of Electivire is so different from Electabuzz and stuff that it's painful. It's like we've gone from one art style to a completely different art style.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't feel like a natural evolution, and that's the problem, because it's supposed to be an evolution, you know?
I don't know if like putting in a third stage to make the transition smoother would have helped, but I don't know like if I would have liked this better if there was like a mid stage which fleshes it out a little bit more. Like
Well, we
maybe-
already had a lot of kids, so
Yeah.
kind of can't.
Yeah. I mean, granted, I'm not a big fan of the babies either. Like, they could go, and I feel like nothing of value would really be lost.
Except for
but,
a funny Smash Melee character.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
It's weird. Normally, I don't mind art style changes within a franchise too much, unless it's like something that's clearly a step down in an important respect, like going from Xenoblade 1 to Xenoblade 2. But in Pokemon, it's a unique question, because the art styles kind of intermingle with each other, and that creates an interesting and sometimes troubling effect.
The worst art style downgrade in video game history to me has to be Aria of Sorrow to Dawn of Sorrow.
Yes.
Easily.
Yes.
Like, if not the worst.
And
top
that's
three.
kind of the same kind of art style shift as Xenoblade 1 to Xenoblade 2, in the sense that we go from something that has this really distinct visual identity that plays into the fantasy feeling of the story to something that's just generically anime styled. And it's like, okay, we're just not even going to have an identity anymore. Okay.
Well, it's not. The big problem for me is not even just that it's generic anime for Dawn of Sorrow and Portrait of Ruin. It's badly drawn generic anime.
Yeah, it kind of
like
is.
your typical Shonen Jump looks better than.
Yeah,
than
it
those
it kind of feels like they didn't just go for generic anime. They also went for a poor imitation of old school anime, and well, I'm a fan of old school anime in certain contexts. I like that about Ys, but in Castlevania's case, it doesn't fit the tone of anything. So it really bothers me there, and it continued to bother me in every game that continued to do it. It especially bothered me in Portrait of Ruin because my first introduction to the Portrait of Ruin characters was in Harmony of Despair, where everyone has this really cool, very well drawn portrait of themselves in
Oh yeah, the artist from Symphony.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So everyone has
all of the Metroidvanias except for the two first DS ones. I think.
Yeah, everyone
Yeah.
has that very distinct style to them. And going back to Portrait of Ruin after that was painful. Because
I mean, it's still a good game. Granted,
it's a good
but
game. It's got a good story. The art style puts me off like nothing else, and I was so glad to see the art style return to something distinctive for Order of Ecclesia.
What's frustrating is that even the sprites still look good. It's just like the
Yeah.
talking head,
Yeah.
like slideshow.
Unfortunately, you
things
see a
that-
lot of that slideshow.
Oh yeah, because they're yelling at each other the entire time.
Yeah.
So you know.
It's like when you play Bloodstained, you have the same kind of dialogue sequences going on, except they're with the 3D models, and that wouldn't have worked half as well for Bloodstained if Bloodstained also hadn't made sure to have a unique visual identity of its own. But
Side note: Bloodstained is amazing, and you should play it.
yeah, it is. Although I'm still waiting for like all the DLC to come out so that I can play the complete
Oh yeah,
version.
same. Like I wanna replay it, but I also wanna wait for some of the Switch version updates, and also like Zangetsu mode and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would also be really fun.